Yo, yo, yo. Oh, my good. I didn't have myself added to the stage, man. I'm talking to myself. Chat, how we doing? Yo, let's get it. All right. All right. We good? We good? Okay, okay. Okay. All right. We're going to dive into it, man. We're going to dive into a couple things. Let me get this off the screen. We're live. I look like a completely different person. A couple hours later, completely different guy. This dog is acting crazy. Not the same person anymore, but we're here, man. No, we're back. So someone in the chat after the earlier live stream, someone was like, well, what was it? I think I asked. I was like, should I do it live or pre-recorded? I was like, I want to dive into this whole Brad Holmes thing. And I think the last comment was like, do it live. If breaking news happens, we'll like, what do you say? We'll chat it up or something. And I saw that comment right before I left. And I was like, you know what? When I get back and I get done with this Draftaholic show, which, shout out, Thursdays, we're live today, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, roughly, talking about draft prospects. I'm going to go live. We're not doing this program. I'm doing this thing live, man. So here we are. Now, again, I do want to lay out, because I know there's going to be a lot of DC talk. I see you, Donkey Kong. My plan is tomorrow to do a defensive coordinator video. Unless someone gets hired tomorrow, my plan is I'm going to dive into outside of the house options. Okay, today, again, for timing reasons, I'm talking about Larry Foote. I want to talk about him a little bit. We can always dive into that more. And then also, we're going to talk about what Brad Holmes said, because Brad Holmes said a lot. I got to be honest, man. I'm not going to react to it live, like play the whole thing. I guess we could grab clips maybe. But I took notes. And I got to be honest. Brad Holmes, end of the year presser, probably my favorite presser every year. Like, that's the one I look forward to. I want to see if he gives us any nuggets, anything that, like, okay, there was something good there. And it's that time. It's nugget season. That sounds kind of crazy, but it is. It's nugget season, man. We got to find all the nuggets. I didn't think that presser had as many nuggets typically. Like, I didn't walk away like, I think I know what he's saying here. Like, I didn't feel that way, but I think that's understandable because of where the roster's at. I actually walked away being feeling pretty good. I feel pretty good about what he said, man. I feel pretty confident about what he said, man. He made me pretty excited with this presser. So we got to talk through the notes of that one. We don't have to hit on all of them, but some of them. What's next to come? This is kind of like the first outline of, okay, what do we think is going to happen? What's going to happen with Carlton Davis? What's going to happen with the coaching staff, I guess, in this point, right? What's going to happen with all this? And this is kind of the first line to get to that. And then we're going to talk about Larry Foote, because there's some things that I honestly, earlier when we were live earlier today, I didn't know Larry Foote was on the staff with Casey. I didn't know they were even on the same staff. I had no idea. So when you guys were saying what you were saying in the chat, and then I looked into Larry Foote, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. They're on the same staff. It's super interesting that you would be set to hire Casey as your defensive line coach, who was also a co-defensive coordinator, as well as Larry Foote, who was also the co-defensive coordinator. Super interesting that you would do that, but it would also make a ton of sense. Like, okay, you hire that guy. Those guys were both co-DCs, and we're going to get into it because, to me, yeah, they were both co-defense coordinators. We're going to get into it because they're definitely different. Stylistically, they're different. But I'm going to make the case as to why I think it makes sense. And we can also talk about why it may not make sense. But like the making sense of the whole idea within what the Lions are looking for, within the structure that they're looking for. Now, before we get to that, this live stream is being brought to you by BetUS, man. So use code YouTube150 if you're looking for your sports book and you want to sign up with BetUS. Use that code down in the top of the description. We got a couple playoff games left. I'm probably not watching. You know what? I might watch. I want to watch the Buffalo one. I want to see Buffalo win. The other game, I'm not interested. I don't want to see the Commanders win at all. I don't want to see the Eagles win at all. Hope they both lose. Don't have any interest here whatsoever. This one I might check out. This is fun. I'm rolling Buffalo. I did this yesterday as well. I'm rolling Buffalo. Give me a 5-piece. Give me a 5-piece on Buffalo. Let me do something light, just to have a little something on it. You know what I mean? So shout out to BetUS, man. YouTube 150. That's the code if you want to find your sports book. You just found it. Okay, let's get into this. Because there's a lot going on. There's a lot here with Brad Holmes. There's a lot. So I'm just going to roll through it, and we'll fly through the things that I say that are not that important, and then we'll stop on the things that I think are more important. Virgil, I see you. Foote and Casey, yeah. Foote and Casey were, I'm sorry, I read that weird from when I read that. Yeah, I read that weird. Yeah, they were both co-defense coordinators. So Brad Holmes talked about, winning 15 games and how that's impressive considering all the attrition they had to deal with, specifically the injuries the Lions had to deal with this season. He also touched on the fact that he thought the Lions were very close, and they're staying the course, and they're not going to alter. He doesn't want to be a prisoner of the moment. I think he said that kind of the same thing last year. I would assume he did. I didn't go back and watch last year's, but I would assume it's pretty similar because last year it was kind of the same idea. It was like, wait a minute, you guys just made the NFC Championship. I mean, do you have to go like, what's that, the all-in kind of move? And that was like a thing for a while. Like, what's that move? Do you have to go make that move? And he's always stuck to this, and he flipped it on its head later on in the presser, which made it fantastic if you haven't seen it, because he flipped it around as like, this is why we don't really have a window, in my opinion. Like he said, we essentially are trying to avoid windows. And that's because we have a really good young core. And he also later hit on the fact that they continue to build through the draft. And he also touched on Jared Goff's MVP season, which later he said that, you know, when asked about the concern of Ben Johnson leaving and Jared Goff, he said, first off, he's done well elsewhere, which is typically the point I go back to. He did well with the LA Rams too. But he feels like Goff, after this MVP season, is just entering his prime. He said he's ascending right now. And I think he's right. You know, as he touched on, like, he's smarter now as a quarterback. He's a better quarterback than he was. And, of course, from production, this was his most productive season he's ever had. You know, this was an incredible season that he had. Holmes' presser this year compared to last year is night and day. You felt his disappointment last year, you said his excitement. Definitely different. And I think, in fairness, the questions came on that side, too. Like, every question was kind of... Like, I mean, the second question or third question I was asked was like, I don't really know how you answer it. To be honest, I don't know what he's supposed to say. You know, like, there were some very confusing questions about, because he gets they get asked about like the emotional feeling, like, how do you feel? And it's like, well, I don't feel good. Like, I don't feel good. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Like, that would be a question I avoid. I understand why they ask it. But I don't think I'd ask any question related to, like, you know, how did it feel when you thought you were going to be this and you had the 1 seed, then you lost? It's like, fantastic. That's what we were hoping for. Like, not good. Now, I don't know what his perspective is, but I know just in general, like, you could just have the perspective of, hey, either you win the Super Bowl or you don't. And I think that, especially after making the NFC Championship game, I think it's fair to have that kind of mindset. I mean, if you never won a playoff game, maybe it's not. Maybe it's like, well, let's take a step here. But I think with winning the 2 playoff games, if you just look at it from that perspective, it's like, well, either we do it or we don't. And I think even when Dan Campbell first talked about it, like, yo, what's the benefit of getting the bye week? He's like, well, it's one less game that we got to play. It's straightforward. That's the biggest benefit. One less game to get to that game. So I guess the next step is definitely Super Bowl. But, I don't know. Anyways, those questions are just confusing. But that being said, I didn't put any notes of that because I didn't think that was that important. He was asked about the pass rush, and I loved his answer. I didn't actually fact check this. Let me double check here. But he did say with the pass rush that he essentially broke it down like this: when you're down 5 defensive ends, he said, I don't know what team has defensive end 6, 7, or 8 that's going to be effective. He said, I thought we played pretty well. We were full health. Pass rush was pretty good, and it was the best pass rush. I'm pretty sure it was the best pass rush in football at the time. Last year we had the best pressure rate in football. And Hutchinson was having the best season of a defensive end in football. So I think he's definitely correct on that. And it really took me back with what he said about the entire defense, man. It kind of made me sad a little bit because I was thinking about this, man. I was thinking about this while I was driving because I was listening to this and I was driving. The defense that we had at the beginning of the season, you know, Joseph Dad's here. He watches this game with us, every week. The defense that the Lions had at the beginning of the season, the success that defense had at the beginning of the season, he was like, I'm excited to see the defense. I want to see what it looks like with the defense. He's like, it's exciting to watch the defense. And it's crazy how that changed. And the season is short, but it also is long in the sense of that gets forgotten. Like, there was a point in time where from his perspective as a fan, he was looking at it that way. Like, he was excited to watch the defense. That's how they came out. That's the talent that they showcased. And that really started in the preseason. There's a lot of good in the preseason. Even the Kansas City game, like, we played their starters, we were playing our backups, held them to a field goal, and it was like, this is pretty good. So from jump, there was a lot of positives. And they still finished really well on most of the rankings across the board. They allowed 20 points per game. They were 7th best in football. Their pass coverage stats continue to improve every year they have. Run defense took a little bit of a step back, but overall, they were a really good defense across the board again. But that just took me back when he said that. But the defensive end position specifically, with what he said, and then he kind of expanded on that, which I think was another great comment. I mean, we all understand this, But it is always nice to kind of have someone like put you back and like, all right, hold up, hold up. This is how we do it. Okay, free agency, we're going to fill some holes. That's where it's going to get fun. You look at the depth chart, you do those things. And then he also had an interesting comment, I think, about the depth chart as well that I thought was pretty cool. I'm going to have to get some beats on here. I need to get some beats on. But what he said about kind of the depth chart of looking at the depth chart, say when we're going in the offseason, we go sign a corner. We're like, man, look at the corners. Man, look what we got. And he's like, that's the depth chart essentially while the season's not happening. You're seeing the depth chart while the season is not happening. And he said that's why we always focus on the depth. And he talked about how it fueled him with all these injuries. He had to pick up 3 guys in one day from a practice squad. He had to poach 3 guys off a practice squad in one day. And I remember that. I remember the videos, like, there's a lot of guys here. He's like, usually that's 1 for a couple weeks. He said, we had to do 3 right after Thanksgiving when guys hit IR. He said that fueled him at a time, which I think as a personnel guy, it should, right? You're, okay, what's next? Who do we have, prepared for? And those guys, they're not scrambling like we are. Like, as a fan, you're like, oh, who's next? And they go out and make a move, and you're like, okay, how did they find that? Well, they had, as Brad said, they had their eyes on a guy. They have report. I mean, that's what the pro scouting department is for. They're prepared on everybody that could be available, that's going to be available, that practice squad players around the league. They're prepared on those guys. So when that time comes, they're going to have an answer, and they were clearly prepared to do that. But I think what he said here about the draft was interesting because he got to pull it back, and he was like, think about when we drafted our inside linebacker, Jack Campbell. We didn't need one. We had a pretty good linebacker room. And that was interesting because it took me back, when we were doing mock drafts at that time, and we would talk about, like, needs of the draft and that kind of thing. And I think Rad was way higher on linebacker, and clearly the Lions were high on it too. But I remember, like, I don't think we need a linebacker. I think one of my mocks I didn't even have us taking a linebacker, or I had us taking, like, I don't even know what, I don't even remember. But I didn't have us taking a linebacker because I didn't think we needed one. And him saying that brings it full circle. Like 2 years later, now we're looking back and it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And I should have realized it in the moment because you try to put everything together. And yeah, Jack Campbell's super helpful. He's our best linebacker. We could definitely have used him. But it makes sense that their perspective wasn't the perspective of at the time, like, oh yeah, Malcolm Rodriguez, this ain't going to work. We need something else. They had the same mindset as, what we could see. Like, linebackers play pretty good, Malcolm, and he came on really fast, and you got Alex, like, this is pretty good. But he even pointed out, like, we had a good linebacker room, and we went out and added an inside linebacker. Then he went to the most recent example, 2 corners. We brought in 2 cornerbacks, on top of bringing in Carlton Davis, of course, this offseason. Brought in 2 corners. Rex Straw didn't even play. And he's like, he basically used that as an example. We draft the best players. It's always been like that for the Lions. We draft the best players. Straightforward. And I think when we think about that as fans, like here's how I think the best way to think about this is there's always there's 2 things to it. Number 1, positions do have different values from what I've been taught. In the sense of like a fullback can't get certain grades. So if I visualize him as he's a fullback, he's not playing tight, he's a fullback, what is his cap? Well, there's only certain grades that I can actually give to a fullback, right? A fullback can't grade. He doesn't have the ceiling to grade like where a receiver could. So from that perspective, there is a importance on position because certain positions can only get to certain spots. That's only a few positions, though, in fairness, right? It's only a few positions. But with that, I think a lot of times we see these draft picks and we're trying to point to like, okay, we needed that, so we got this guy and now it makes sense. But if you really think about it, I think a lot of times you could just make the case, step back for a second. When the Lions make a draft pick, could you make a case that, well, maybe they actually didn't need that, but it was the best player to them? Because I think you can always get yourself to a point where, like, yeah, this makes us better. Because I don't know of a scenario where a draft pick makes you worse. Like when the Lions took Rakestraw last season, I was shocked. We were live on Bleacher Report at the time. I loved Rakestraw. But after we took Terrion, I took Rakestraw on Bleacher Report. I was shocked. You took Terrion, we get to that round, and I was like, okay, I wasn't even looking at the cornerback board. I was like, everything else but corner. Let me see what's on there. And the Lions took Rakestraw. And I'm fired up. Like, oh, we got Rakestraw. But that was the perfect example of, like, we're just drafting the best players. And sometimes those things do align. But he made the emphasis, and I think especially right now it's important to look at it as those things can really align when you have a roster where we do. When you have what we have heading into next season. And to the offensive line point, Brad didn't really give a clear-cut answer. Said there was talks at the end of the season with Kevin Zeitler, but with a guy that's that age, that's on both sides. So we'll see if anything plays out. I'd love to have Zeitler back. He said that he felt early the season scheme change, a little bit slow. Then obviously we saw him take off this season. Tyler had a really good year, missed the end of the year with injury. But I think that what he did specifically point out was like, it's about the offensive line as a whole. That whole thing, I think the big takeaway there was like that will never not get touched. Like the offensive line will never not be put in a light of like, we can always be better here. We can always upgrade this spot. And it doesn't mean it has to be a draft pick necessarily, because in the past, I had wanted the Lions to draft a backup tackle. I mean, it was year after year. I was like, can we get a backup tackle? I don't trust our backup tackle at all. And it was really after kind of seeing what it was like without Taylor Decker, what was that, the first season? It was like seeing what that looked like. It was like, we need a backup tackle. And we held off, and we didn't do that. But in terms of the idea of always upgrading that, or always having the depth there and always having a well-rounded, it didn't mean that it had to be through the draft. If they felt who they had was better than the draft pick and it didn't make sense, then it kind of ties back to that original point of I could have made a case, I think easily, in that 2022 draft we should have taken a tackle. At the end of the draft, I'm standing like, we got to take a tackle. We took Chase Lucas, I think it was. And it was like, we should have took a tackle. And I was like, I don't understand why we didn't take a tackle. But when you hear what he thinks about how important the offensive line is, he's like, that's our identity. It would have made sense that a guy looking at it like that would have been like, I'm taking a tackle. I mean, it doesn't matter. We're 7th round. We're taking a tackle. We need somebody in here. And they just didn't do it. So was that ultimate faith in Matt Nelson? Or was that looking at it like, this is our best player? So I think it's hard because I think then there's also, at that time it was the value of UDFAs. We go to UDFA. We bring in an offensive tackle. And that was our big money UDFA. He didn't end up, sticking around, unfortunately. So we still addressed it. We just did it in a different way. I think it's important to always remember that, like, there are multiple avenues to make this happen. And I think when you think about if we're just looking at a hole on the roster, if the Lions are simply addressing a hole on the roster, it's probably not likely that that's how they're doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's unlikely that the Lions are coming into a spot and saying, our answer is this draft pick. And if it's not this draft pick, I don't know where it comes from. And I think we've seen that now over the years that, like, that's been the approach. If there's a hole on the roster and you're like, we should probably address this, it's probably coming in free agency, or it's probably coming to the draft, or not the draft, as UDFA, or it's someone that they like on the roster, and they like them more than we do, and they feel good about what they have, and it doesn't add up. But the idea of, like, reaching for a pick because it's a hole, it's clearly not the Lions, man. It's not the Lions. It's not who they are. So I don't know. I thought that was cool because it always kind of takes me back, makes me think, like this time, right, when we're getting into who's the needs and all this stuff, and it's like, man, you don't want to get too caught up in that, because then you start to overlook things that are right in front of you. Like, you start to overthink things that are right in front of you. And that's what I did with Rakestraw. Perfect example last year. I've tried my best to not do that. I've tried my best. After year one, I was like, I can't overlook position. They took back-to-back defensive tackles. Like, not doing that again. Not overlooking a position just because I think that we're good there. But in Jack Campbell, for example, I thought we were good there. We took a linebacker. I was like, oh, okay. And then you can get to the point where you're like, oh, hey, we did need a linebacker. We should have done that. Okay, but any first-round pick at any position probably helps that unit, if we're being real. If the Lions came back this year and they trade up to 18 to take a corner, you'd be like, all right, well, Rakestraw, we haven't seen him yet. Put him outside Terrion. There's no Carlton. We can make that make sense. Put him in the slot. I don't know. We can top slot corner. Like, you can make all these things make sense. That's the point. You can make most of those things make sense, especially when you go to the top. And then once you get beyond that, man, you're drafting a lot of times for depth. And even Brad Holmes talked about that here as he was saying that, like, the Lions and the draft picks that we have, like, we don't want to essentially rely on the rookies. He made that, he kind of threw that in there. Like, we're not going to, ideally, we never want to rely on the rookies. And that's kind of how his perspective was with Mahogany. He didn't expect that, at one point Mahogany was going to be able to go, right? With the time that he missed, he's out for so long. I never thought he'd even play this year. And then we hadn't even seen him as fans. He's on the NFL list, and then bam, he's playing. It's like, oh, all right. I didn't think he was going to play this year. Then he's activated, and he's above everybody else at guard. So it is cool to see that, though, as a side note, like in practice, that there's value there. You can earn a spot in practice. We've seen that. He was a great example. Clearly, like, he earned that spot. That dude was a dog this year. There was no doubt that when he played, he was an upgrade over what we had. Like, I don't think you can make a case of, like, well, he's a rookie, that's why you got to steps. Like, that dude was the best dude for backup guard. He earned that, and it was clear cut. I like KO'd, but that was the guy, and they rolled with it. He talked about adding Za'Darius. as kind of like the example of, going all in, that kind of thing. Like he actually said that was the most difficult acquisition, like that essentially he's had to make, I think, during a season because of how thin that was. And I believe it. I believe it after, when Azeez Ojulari was a name. I don't know what the interest level was of trading him, but I remember as time like kind of got closer to the deadline, the idea of trading him became like seemingly less and less. Like the reports were like, yeah, we're not moving off this guy, or it's going to cost you a lot. And it was like, okay, there seems to be like they're not going to do this. As time went on, it got to that point with a guy like Azeez, for example. So I definitely believe it. And I think the way that he broke it down made a ton of sense. Like, hey, teams have 4 edge rushers. If we lose 1 and we got 2.5 months left of the season, now we have 3. Where do we go? Like, we need depth too. We need the numbers. And I was like, that makes a ton of sense because I don't, you just think of like, oh, let's go pick somebody up. But I believe it completely after the Azeez thing because it felt like he was going to be moved and then it like immediately kind of quieted down. I was like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Tennessee had multiple guys that was like, oh, these guys are definitely going to move. I don't think anybody moved at the deadline there. You had just a few edge rushers move when the deadline took place. And one of them was Za'Darius, who was rare as heck because he was a starter at the time. I love me some Za'Darius. You know what I mean? Keep Za'Darius, man. Shout out to Bill with the super sticker. Man, I wish I could see this. Wait, yeah, I can. Oh, you got the sunglasses. I see you, Bill. I appreciate you with the sunglasses, man. I don't know if it pops up when I do that, though. No, probably not. It just shows super sticker. I don't know. Come on, StreamYard. I mean, y'all doing a lot of things right, but that's not doing it. It's not doing it. You know what I mean? We need to bring Muhammad back. I like Muhammad. I think Muhammad got better. I think Muhammad's replaceable. I think he got better. I would not, after this season, look at Muhammad as a starter. I think he's a backup that's replaceable. I thought he got better against the run. I think he's very average as a pass rusher, I think at best. Like I wouldn't have an issue bringing back Muhammad, this offseason. Because there was growth, and I think that anybody that grows, there should always be interest there. Guy that gets truly better, there should be interest there. But if we didn't bring him back, I wouldn't not understand it. Like I would get that too. Those 2 third-rounders are massive. It's fantastic. I'm glad we got those 2 third-rounders, man. That's. I know Brad was hype. You're talking about guys that are hype. Brad and that whole staff had to be fired up. Like, man, we don't want to lose AG, but, and speaking about that, I wanted to clip this. I should have clipped this. He spoke on essentially moving off of coordinators, like, okay, you need this type of player for that guy's scheme. And, like, the approach to that. Like, how does this guy change and all that stuff. And I think especially now we're talking about coordinators. That fits in, and it's something that really needs to be focused on. But what he said, I think, was fantastic. What I think he laid out was fantastic of, like, these guys are either Lions or they're not. And I think that the way that he lined this up made me think of all of the scouting things that I had did over the years. Because this was kind of the same mentality. Like, I always wondered about this because I had always seen it from the scouting perspective, never really from the coaching perspective, right? I'm definitely not at that level. First, high school last year, but definitely not at that level. And, it's different. You're not like drafting guys in high school. So I always wondered about that. But that being said, the way that he broke it down, I know that the coaches will look at the film and they'll see it as well. And they can kind of envision the fit and there's things that matter there. But he was like, I've been a part of, for example, linebacker rooms. He said, I've heard all the terminology for linebackers. And he's Buck, Mike, Mac, all these different guys he's naming out. And he's like, we're not going to go into the draft like, man, we need to add that Mac backer. He's like, either that linebacker fits as a Lion or he doesn't. And I think that approach makes a ton of sense because that's how I had always learned it. Like, I always wonder when we were doing it, like, how do we do this when we don't know, like, how they're going to fit? And then should I be, like, looking at teams and, like, picking the position they play? And that was never the focus. Like, I always wondered about that. I was like, why is there so much emphasis on traits rather than how he's doing in terms of how these things are looking schematically? Every emphasis that I've been around for a scouting has always so heavily leaned into just traits. What are the traits of the player? Forget the fit. Forget the position he's playing in college and what's the traits that he has? And if we get the guy with the right traits, and as Brad always points out, the intangibles, fits that team, we'll find a spot for that dude. And I'm not saying everybody knows about it. I'm not saying everybody does it that way, but it sounds like the Lions do it that way, and that's how I've always learned it. And I thought that was such a cool statement, man. That was like one of my favorite statements to hear because I was like, That's what I've learned. I've learned that kind of thinking, and it makes a ton of sense because if you look at it from what are the traits, right? And if I said, here's Derek Barnes, here's his traits, bam, we'll lay him out there. If you think back to the first year we drafted Barnes, and I don't know if it was Brad or Dan, I think it was Brad. He was like, he's going to be our Mike Backer or whatever. Years later, he's not even playing that position anymore. But he's better now in his new position, I would say, than what he was. When he's healthy, he's better in his new position. But the traits fits the new positions that he's playing. But overall, what's allowed him to last is what Brad Holmes said is he's a lion. Like him being a lion, from the tangible traits to the intangibles, like everything that he has allowed him to stick around. It's like, we're going to find a spot for this dude. We're going to find a spot for this guy. But if we pigeonhole him that it has to be this when we draft him, that to me is what causes issues. Because now I think you run out of spots really quickly. If I draft a guy to play a spot and he can't play that spot, all of a sudden we're going to run out of talent. We're going to run out of dudes. We're going to put ourselves in compromised spots where it's like, well, we have to. We don't have anybody else for that spot. And now I think you get to the part where you're reaching. You're reaching on draft picks. You're reaching on contracts that you're giving out. And that's the importance of the coaching staff. You got to have those dudes that can make it work, find a way to make it work. And I'm telling you, when we go to this Larry Foote thing, Larry Foote's defense and what their defense was is not like ours. But if you have the coaching staff, and the best coaches should be able to do this, it's like, as long as he has the traits to stick, we'll find a spot for the guy. And I thought that was a fantastic quote from Brad Holmes, the way that he laid that out, because during this time of the year, and as we continue forward, that's going to be talked about so much. I think it's something that needs to be relayed, is like, pause for a second, right? Let's not get too overly caught up in like exactly what the stylistic scheme fit. Like, things matter to an extent, but if you have the traits, then we can expand on it. You know what I mean? If you have the traits. If you lack something that doesn't allow you to play something specifically, that's just a knock on the traits that he has. Like, he doesn't have that skill set. Whatever, maybe he doesn't have the long speed. We have to put him in this coverage because he doesn't have the long speed. We have to have a safety over top. Like, that matters. But just because he played a certain style in college doesn't mean he can't do it something different in the NFL, as long as he has the right traits for it. And a lot of times, as we know, learning, football intelligence, toughness, all of these things, if you have the football intelligence and toughness, you can pick it up. And you got the good coaches, we'll make it work. So I don't know. I thought that was my favorite one. I wanted to spend some time there. That was my favorite quote. He trusts Dan to bring in the coaches because he's had to do it before. And I think if there's a reason to be optimistic about the Lions finding these coaches, I mean, it's pretty clear. This dude was calling plays. Like, you know what I saw today? Or no, maybe it was yesterday. And this is like, no hate or nothing. Like, I just saw an article. I don't even know who wrote it. It was like basically reasons to be optimistic about the Lions. It was something like that. And when I read that, I just thought, like, this is a crazy title. Like, I'm not mad at it. I love the optimistic reasons. Like, you should bring those. Fans need them, especially at this time. Like, I'm with it. Right, and I'll do the same thing. But it's crazy that that's the title of something. In wake of losing your coordinators, it's like, that's the vibe right now. And it's like, well, wait a minute. This guy literally was like, I'm going to call plays. And it's like, every year that Dan's been here, since year one, the thing that constantly was like, hey, Dan does this well, it's coaching staff. He's always brought in fantastic coaching staff. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's worked. I thought Anthony Lynn was a good coach. It just didn't work here. I thought we had a lot of personnel issues. Not everything fits. Sometimes things just don't fit. Aubrey Pleasant, things just don't fit. But we've always had really good coaching staffs. And it's like, that idea of like, we're going to be in trouble because we lost our coordinators, like, it hurts. But man, I mean, if there's a guy that has if there's a guy that has a track record of like, I'm going to get this right, it's Dan Campbell. It's absolutely Dan Campbell. And Brad went further on that. Like, essentially, why is Jared Goff, you're not worried about losing Ben? He's like, as long as I'm here and as long as Dan's here, essentially we're going to be all right. As long as I'm here, Dan's here. Because Brad's like, yo, I'm not going to build a team that he can't be successful in. I know what he needs. And then obviously the love that he gave to Dan Campbell and the coaching staff that he will eventually find. And again, I think that it's very possible that I think he gets super underrated in terms of his football IQ, especially offensively. Like, offensively, man, I think we're going to find out this year, because he even went out and said, he's like, Dan Campbell's like, yo, I got to be very involved in the offense because I'm the offensive guy. It's like, okay, I see you. But like, that gets, I think, sometimes forgotten just because of the perception of him. And you think of Ben as like this wizard and stuff, which he was. But it's like, yo, Dan Campbell's a really smart dude, man. And I think that this will be a great offseason to see that come into fruition of like, let's see who he adds. Let's see who he brings in. And I'm actually really excited for the opportunity to see what this offense looks like without Ben. Not that I wanted Ben gone. I love me some Ben Johnson. But, like, I'm excited to see how this plays out. Like, if the Lions offense continues to cook, we got to look back and be like, man, we didn't give Dan enough credit, man. Like, it was more about what he lost than what he's actually proven. And what Dan has proven is he's going to find the right dudes. He's going to put together an awesome staff. And when this guy took over play calling, we were better. We were better, man. It's crazy. It's crazy. But he doesn't give off that vibe. Like, he doesn't look like Mike. He's not Mike McDaniel. You know, you don't have that expectation about him. But dude knows what he knows what he's after, and I think that's what's important. Dan knows what he wants. He knows what he wants. He's like, this is how I want it to look. I know that's what I want, offense and defense. And I think that's really important for other coaches that he brings in too, because they're going to know exactly what it's going to look like. And even Brad said that. Like, usually coaches that get hired here, if they take the job here, they know what it's going to be like. They know what we're after. I think it makes it really clear cut. I'm so happy we can have a defense similar to the Bucs scheme-wise. I always loved their defense along with the Texans. So we're going to talk about that because there are things we need to talk about. We are about to be a heavy blitz defense, basically. That is a heavy blitz defense. We are a heavy blitz defense too. So those are one of the two things that absolutely cross over for sure. And I'll show you things that don't cross over, but that does cross over. Nobody talking about speed at linebacker. You say we need speed at linebacker. Speed's an important trait. Speed's an important trait, no question. I think that speed on its own isn't that important. I think speed in the way that you play fast is important. Play speed is everything. 40 speed is nothing. That's how we've always done it. Is like play, especially on defense. We would grade play speed. We never graded what's your 40 time. We could include it. You can run a 4.1, dude. If you're not playing fast, it's a disaster. Play speed was always important. But to your point, if we're looking at play speed, yeah, that's always a great trait to have. Every defensive position, offensive positions too, they have great play speed. It's a good thing. It's a good thing because it means everything's coming together. You looking fast means that maybe you are fast, but you're probably playing the game really fast too. And especially in the NFL because everybody's fast. Everybody's fast in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like, if it was about driving 40, the NFL would look like track. Like, everybody's fast, but it's like how fast do you play? And if you're looking fast, to that comment, it's 100% true. If you look fast, your play speed's fast. That's very important. It's one of the top traits for pretty much every position. Yeah, shout out to the memberships. Someone give out memberships? In the past, probably. Okay, I want to continue, though, because I think there's a few more here that we can hit on. Hit on the linebacker thing. That was great. He hit on the Za'Darius thing, though, but we kind of went into that a little bit. He didn't really, mention what that could look like for the future. I was kind of waiting for him to give us a little bit of something. I don't feel like he gave us really anything in the future. He probably don't know either, but he didn't really give us nothing on so much of this. Yeah, he talked about the poaching, the 3 players, talked about Mahogany, who, he said during the OTAs was like, this guy's ready. Like, this guy looks like he's ready to go. Then the NFI list, and he comes back and obviously took off, but he was an aggressive player. And again, speaking of play speed, aggressive. Like, he's like, that's a good thing, especially for an offensive lineman. But, yeah, playing fast is a good thing. Aggressive could kind of tie into that. A lot of Manu. He said he did the thing with Manu, and, these are things that we always forget. Like, Manu is, this guy is jumping up a massive step. And he was bringing up the things like, the lingo offensively that we utilize, protections, cadences. He said, that kind of stuff, it's going to need some time. But he did point out, because it's something we don't get to see, he's like, if you've seen the tape from this guy, I think he said back at camp, versus in practice, doesn't even look like the same guy. Doesn't look like the same dude. And I think it's pretty cool. Hopefully it bodes well. But it really could that the Lions stuck him at tackle. And I don't know if at practice they put him at guard, but assuming they left him at tackle, I think it's pretty cool, and it could work out really well that they allowed him to continue to just, from day one, you're a tackle. Let's roll. Especially if he's having issues with cadence, like the thing, if we got to get those things down, moving him to different positions is probably not ideal. Like, let's build a foundation somewhere. So it could turn out really well. Hopefully it does. I think that was the big thing. And then he hit on Terrion a little bit, talked about the up and downs of Terrion. He said, I think he was talking about Terrion here. The waters calmed a little bit as the season went on, but he's got the instincts. He's tough. He'll tackle. Yeah, I wasn't upset with Terrion. I actually thought, man, there was a handful of games towards the end of the year. I was like, this looks pretty good. Even the Washington game, I still walked away watching that back, he's making some plays, man. He gave up the shot play. You live with that. And there's some things that you don't like that are just ugly. But in terms of like just pure coverage ability, like that's there. Like that's clearly there. This dude can cover. And I think we felt that a little bit more as the season went on. I always talk about how I felt there was ups and downs all season. There was things that were like, this is bad, and he fixed it, and this was bad. That stuff, yeah, that happened. But the fact that he always responded to those things, and I think, again, by the time we got to the end of the season, like, as a pure coverage guy, man-to-man coverage, this dude could cover, man. You know what I mean? This dude could do, even from jump, though, he showed that. Like, he would just be grabby, but he always showed his ball skills from jump, and then, get towards the end, I mean, he had an opportunity to get an interception a couple times. He just didn't do it, but he had an opportunity, and that was kind of the most disappointing thing is that he didn't because he was such a ball hawk in his final season. But I think he was clearly trending the right direction. Like, if he was... I don't even know how to sugarcoat that. Like, I think it's very clear he was trending in the right direction. Like, I don't even think I'm on an island there. I think it's very clear he was trending in the right direction. Yeah, hit on Kevin Zeitler a little bit. Carlton Davis, he said he felt was better here than in Tampa. Completely agree. I think Carlton had one of the best seasons of his career. Carlton, you can make the case, had his best season of his career here. I think playing more man helped, but the weird thing is that he graded, and I think coverage-wise, statistically, he was better in zone, than man, which is pretty wild because he was always known as the man guy, and Tampa doesn't play enough man. It's like, how is this going to work? And here, it's like in zone, he looks awesome. Well, I guess that's what he's done in the past, but man, he was super well-rounded. He tackled really well. Like, he was a really good run support guy, and when we added him, there's people like Tampa side, like, questioning, like, I don't know if he's willing to stick his nose and that kind of thing anymore. He handled all that. And then I think he touched on Iffy just a little bit. Like, saying that basically it's a two-way street. No intense talks with Iffy. Kind of gave me the vibe that he wants Iffy back, and that's kind of their mindset, but I don't know that he does, man. I think if he could get paid a lot, someone could really love it. I think he's got a chance to be the best safety in football. I don't know where I'm at on that one. I don't know where I'm at. I assume they want to bring him back. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty much everything. I think that was everything. Definitely makes me want to have Carlton Davis back. Oh, yeah, then he hit on Kirby Joseph. Like, I don't know how that guy didn't make the Pro Bowl. And I think the big thing that he said there is like, yo, he's a ball hawk, but he's also willing to tackle. And that was huge. Like, he's ball hawk, he's also willing to tackle. And those talks, they said, well, obviously it's different because they have the deadline. They have to get to a certain spot before they can do that after year 3. But, like, those are on the docket, he said, and that's a no-brainer. He's going to get re-signed. No, he's going to get paid a ton of money. He's going to make bank. Whenever he wants to do that, whenever they both agree, like, oh, it's time, he's going to make a ton of money. You're out on Mosley? Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. I would assume the Lions are, too. I was surprised when they brought him back this year, to be honest. I liked it, though, but, yeah, I mean. You do a review of both rookie seasons of Arnold and Kool-Aid to see if we picked the right Alabama D? Probably. I think the thing with Kool-Aid, though, is... The thing with Kool-Aid, though, is tough, is Kool-Aid didn't play that many snaps, if I remember right. Like, he played, and he actually played well. He did really well in man coverage this season. But if I remember correctly, I don't think he played nearly as much as Terrion. Let me double-check, though. I don't think he did. I don't think he came in as a starter, either, which plays into that. What did he play? 680? Well, 680 is a lot. Yeah, he definitely played less, but 680 is a lot. I don't know. I guess Kool-Aid had a good season. I like Kool-Aid a lot coming out of Bama. He wasn't over Terrion for me. Terrion was my favorite corner, but I liked Kool-Aid a lot coming out. I think Kool-Aid's going to be good. I think the ceiling is much higher for Terrion. I think the ceiling is higher for Terrion. I think Terrion's got such a high ceiling, bro. Terrion, I think, can be special, man. I really do, but it's going to take time. But I still believe that dude can be special. Like, man, I'm fired up for what that's going to turn into. Because, like, Rakestraw for me, like, I think Rakestraw's going to be, he's going to be good. But I think Terrion could be outstanding. Like, Terrion could be special, I think, at some point. Okay, with that, will any Lions go to the Pro Bowl? There's a few. I actually got an email today. It's like, yo, Jared Goff's going to the Pro Bowl. Get your tickets. Like, I'm not getting my tickets, dog. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't watch the dang Pro Bowl. But, yeah, no, there are Lions going. There are Lions that were invited. I assume they're going. I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't. If I was a player and I got knocked out, I'd probably go. I think I'd probably go. Unless I had, like, a vacation hooked up or something, I'd probably go. You know what I mean? Go have some fun. But I think Jared Goff's going. I think he's going. I got an email today. I don't know if he, like, announced it or they're just saying that he's going. I don't know. You better go. They just said it. You better be going. All right? If this dude don't go, now we got a problem. All right. Let's go to this Larry Foote conversation, man. Let me move this. Okay. Let's go to this Larry Foote thing. Reminder of the Kool-Aid man? Oh, no, that's crazy. I like that. Branch has the highest potential to be. What is realistic? Terry to be no quarterback one? Man, hopefully not soon, man, because I hope Carlton sticks around. Hope Carlton sticks around. You know what I mean? We get Carlton back. Let him continue to be cornerback one. Let that guy be cornerback one. I'm cool with that. You continue to be a great cornerback number 2. Let's get you there first. So realistically, year 3. You know what I mean? But if Carlton doesn't come back, he could definitely be the best corner we have next season. Okay, so let's go to this, man. Let's go to Larry Foote a little bit. So Larry Foote, similarities to Calvin Shepard, been a linebacker coach, outside linebacker, inside linebacker coach, played linebacker, and he's on the same timeline essentially as Casey. You know, both co-defensive coordinators this past season, and there's a lot of things that I kind of brought to this, so just bear with me as we go through this. There's a lot here. But this past season was a defensive pass game coordinator, which currently our new defensive line coach, or who is going to be our new defensive line coach, was the defensive run game coordinator last season, so that ties right in with it. So he was their defensive pass game coordinator, and we needed that because Terrell Williams is gone. He was their defensive pass game coordinator, which I think is super interesting, just like on a quick side note. Like I don't know how often that happens where a linebacker coach is your defensive pass game coordinator. I don't think I've seen that very often, where that's your linebacker coach. Like usually it feels like your secondary coach, one of your secondary coaches has their spot, not your linebacker coach. So that's interesting. It's kind of unique, but I think it speaks really well to him for sure. This was definitely Todd Bowles' scheme. There's been a lot of consistency in the way that they play defensively. Okay, that's pretty year after year. They're usually a pretty heavy zone team. There was more man a couple seasons ago. Heavy blitzing team, 3-4 defense, a lot of flexibility in the back end. So we're gonna get into that. But yeah, he spent his time as a linebacker coach with Arizona. That's where he kind of started. Then an outside linebackers coach when he joined Tampa Bay, which similar to Calvin Shepard, we know outside to inside. Outside linebacker coach at first with Tampa, and then he went to inside linebacker coach, and now he's inside linebacker coach plus defensive pass game coordinator for Tampa Bay. And now he's interviewing with the Lions, or I guess he's supposed to interview with the Lions for defensive coordinator. Now, I got graphics for all this. Got too many graphics probably. One of these are kind of similar to what we did. I think this might be the same graphic from earlier, actually, now I'm looking at it. This may have been the same one. I think I added a little bit to it. I have clips that I want to talk through as well, and like what I think makes this make sense. But these were the stats from this past season. Jets defensive coordinator, his stint there, because this is a defensive line coach. Not that part. This is the same stats from earlier because it carries over. That's why I put that in here, because he's working with linebackers, so it makes sense to put their yards per carry, the run game, and all that stuff in there. And then also put, the passing game stuff, which is going to be on the next slide. But yeah, this stuff, ignore this. This is our defensive line coach. We did that earlier. Now at the bottom, here's what I think is important, right? So 2019, 2021, he's working with the outside linebackers. He comes in. And one thing that's been, I think, great about Tampa Bay, similarly to what we've done defensively, and it's probably because Todd Bowles is the head coach and they've been able to keep that consistency, just like the Lions have over the last few years with their coordinators, specifically Aaron Glenn. There's been so much consistency with their personnel. Like it's been the same pretty much every season. Like there's not a lot of changes that happen there. You get like a guy like Carlton who left, and there's your big change, and then it's kind of stabilizes, and it's like, all right, here's the guy we drafted, and they're very consistent with who they have. Like for 3 straight years, it was Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett at outside linebacker that he was working with. And Shaq Barrett had the 3 best seasons probably of his career with Tampa Bay, later in his career. 3 best seasons of his career. JPP did his thing. They had Carl Nassib to that, going back a little bit, 2019. But a lot of continuity as we go through this that you're going to notice. Now, we pointed out this earlier. The run defense stats are consistent. It's hard to do, but they have those. Sacks, top 7 pretty much every single season. That's fantastic. They are getting production. And then you can also see that they're a heavy blitzing team, which outside of this season right here, it was still top 10. They blitz a lot. And there's a lot of flexibility with the way that they do it. It's not just that they blitz a lot. It's that there's a lot of movement up front. There's a ton of movement up front. A lot. I mean, there's a lot going on, and they have a lot of flexibility because they're outside linebackers that they keep their outside linebackers, 2 outside linebackers on the ball almost every play. So between Joe Tryon and Shoinka, what they have at outside linebacker allows for so much flexibility. These guys dropping into coverage, rushing the passer, that kind of thing. And their pressure rates are typically pretty good too. Now, this was one of the weird ones because this one dropped off in 2023, 21st in the league, but they still had their sacks there, which again, those things have to go hand in hand. If you're going to get sacks, you also have to be good in the back end. You You have to tie those things together. So consistent tells me that those things ties together. Now, you're going to notice when you get to their coverage stats that it's not that they had the best coverage every season or nearly anywhere near it, but they do have consistency with sacks, and that speaks to it kind of as a whole, which I think is one, starting it off, that's one reason why this whole thing is interesting, because you're tying two guys back together that work together. They have a vision of what this can look like, and I'm sure it'll honestly look different, because the first thing that we have to start off with is coverage type, and we're going to show clips, but first thing is this. Not a heavy man coverage team. Now, this year was interesting, right? 2023 was interesting because 73% of the time they played zone, which was 20th in football. 25% they played man through week 16. These are all through week 16 of that season. So they did play more man that year. And this wasn't far off from the Lions man coverage rates. So I think that it doesn't, because we say Lions have to play man, doesn't mean they have to play maybe at the rate that they did this past season. But I do think clearly that fits their personnel. Carlton is clearly flexible because Carlton was with Tampa Bay. He was good with Tampa Bay. They play a lot more off coverage. There's a lot more zone, cover 4, cover 3, Tampa 2. There's a lot more of that. So he would fit into that because he's done it in the past. But I do think for a majority of the defensive backs, like man coverage, that's who the Lions are, these rankings will probably jump. So in terms of bringing the scheme and saying that it's going to look like what it looked like at Tampa if he was hired, I don't think so completely. I think there's things that would carry over. I think there's great things that could carry over, but my early estimation is it's not going to be, this is Tampa Bay's defense in Detroit. I don't think it'll look like that. I think there'll be uniqueness to it. I think there'll be more man coverage to it. I think the blitzing will be up there. Maybe there's a different way they do it, but I think in general, the creativity that they have of who blitz is what makes them tough. I think there's individual players that are really going to excel because of the way that they play stylistically. But I definitely think, like, for example, man coverage will jump. Single high coverage will be pretty heavily utilized. I think those two things will kind of stay still with what the Lions are defensively, maybe drops a little bit, but I still think they're going to be that thing because they've always been willing to adjust. But I just think right now where their personnel is at, it makes sense for them to still be a man-heavy team. Now, one of the big differences could be pressing versus off-man coverage. That could be one of the big differences because Carlton's good in off-man. Amik Robertson played off-man with Vegas. Terran Arnold played off-man in college. He played both. So Terran was a press corner, but he could play off-man coverage too. Rakestraw could play off-man coverage as well. I like those. I like the two rookies more so as press man corners, but I definitely know that the other guys that we have can fit into a man scheme that's playing a little more off coverage. I think that's the other area where we probably see more of a jump, where if they came to Detroit, there's going to be more press coverage than what it was in Tampa because they don't do it much at all. Do you think we have a real shot we could have him as DC? I think there's a shot because the connection makes sense. I think there's a shot because the connection makes sense. I don't want to say I think he's like top of the board. It feels a little bit kind of off, like, if it kind of feels a little off a little bit from like the top names and then all of a sudden this name flies in, but that makes it more believable to me. Like if this was just the top name the Lions were interviewing, I don't know how much I'd believe it as much as I believe something like this. Campbell said he'd be patient. He hires the defensive line coach. Like, I think visualizing what their vision is of what a defense can look like against Dan Campbell saying, and this, it's not always a bad thing. I always want experience too, right? Well, in the past I did. I want experience as head coach. Initially, when I hired a defense coordinator, I wanted experience. I think that experience could be very valuable as a prior DC, which, in fairness, our defensive line coach is going to have that. He was a defense coordinator. Jim O'Neill has that, who's still in the Lions staff. He was a 3-time defensive coordinator, so we do have those guys. It's not a must that you had to be a defensive coordinator before. It's not, I think, the worst thing when you have a foundation, which the Lions have. Let me go to this real quick. The Lions have a foundation of who they want to be. Man pressure, right? They have an identity of what they are and who they are built to be, right? And there's consistency. Just like Tampa Bay, their personnel is year after year after year, same guys, same core. I don't think that's the worst spot to have a new defensive coordinator step into. It's why I kind of opened my ears a lot more to the idea of an outside of the house or defense coordinator than I do offensive coordinator, because I think defensive coordinator, with the foundation that you have, there's a lot of guys that can play more man coverage and do that while also at the same time bringing pressure. There's a lot of guys that can fit into, like, oh, I like to do that stylistically too. And these guys can fit into that, I believe, stylistically. I don't think it's a must that you had to be a defensive coordinator to make this work. Obviously, Glenn wasn't. But I think also when you get a guy that's had experience doing that and you have two guys that are connected at the hip like this, I think that having a foundation allows you to be that. Because the core of the players know what they want to be. The core of the players know who they're going to be. But as a coaching staff, you're going to have flexibility. Things are going to change. It's not going to look like it did with Glenn. There's going to be differences. And remember, Aaron Glenn, it wasn't like 90% of the time Aaron Glenn played cover one. Like, he played more man than anybody else. I think this season was 60%. That means still 40% of the time they're in some sort of zone coverage. So there was still, and a majority of the time, 60% is ridiculous. Like, that's insanely high. Outside of Denver, nobody else did that. It's insanely high. We wouldn't even do that in the past. It's an insanely high number. So, like, I think that opens the door for a guy that doesn't have that experience, that can feel a little bit of ball. Because a lot of teams, I think, when they're hiring a defense coordinator, they're looking at it from the perspective of, our defense is bad. We need changes. New guys coming in. We need to get this thing right. The Lions are hiring their new defense coordinator not because they fired one, but because the guy was good enough and they were so good that he left. That, to me, is a much different situation. That I think that you don't necessarily need to have a guy that's been a defensive coordinator. Now, I think there's pros to that, but I don't think he has to have been. I think it can be a first-time thing, and I think it can work out because there's still a foundation that's built here. And especially when you have two guys tied at the hip that'd be working a lot together, that makes a ton of sense. That makes a ton of sense because they've been handling a lot with Bowles, and now it gives them the opportunity to be different. Like Todd Bowles, that was his defense. I don't know what their defense is going to look like, but that was Todd Bowles' defense. And I got to assume when I go back to look at this defensive line coach, his defense did not look exactly like Todd Bowles before he got... His defense at the Jets probably didn't look like this is Todd Bowles' defense. I'm assuming it looked different. It has its own unique twist, but maybe there was still a core foundation of who they wanted to be. So I think it's open. I think the door is absolutely open. Now, that being said, though, there's a couple things that I think are important with this. So I put the pass... I'm going to take this off the screen for a second. I put the pass defensive stats on this top. It's kind of a weird thing to do because he was the linebacker coach, but again, he was the defensive pass game coordinator. So I feel like it's reasonable to throw it up there, I guess. Year after year here, probably got a little bit worse. Across the board. The interesting thing that and again, I think this is style. The completion percentage are typically higher than what we allow. I think that's style because even when the Lions pass defense wasn't great, say in 2022, they had a stretch there where they had the lowest completion percentage allowed in football. To me, that's style. If you play a lot more man, you're probably going to allow a lower completion percentage than you do in zone. Now, you may give up explosives, and that was the Lions' problem in the past. They gave up all explosives. They would play a lot of man, and then you get a lot of explosive plays, and it was like, that's not great. That was the downside of it. But I think that's kind of natural just on the way that you play it stylistically. The interceptions dropping is not fantastic either. Again, so much of this comes back to personnel. As we know, sub 100 pass ratings is fine across the board. But we start to get to the individuals of this. And Green Bay wanted to interview Casey, got him. Oh, good. That makes me like it even more. We did that to the kicker. We did that to their defensive coach. Fantastic. I love seeing that. When you start looking at the individuals, because then you go to the linebacker rankings, and again, you're going to notice so much consistency. Like when you see these names, I mean, think about this, right? 2022, it was their top three backers, Levante David, Britt, and Dennis. I think I did that backwards. Maybe not. 2023, yeah. David, Britt, and I think it was it Dennis again? 2023? It should have been Dennis again. 2024, David, Britt, Dennis. Like, it's the same unit over and over. So I think when we watch this team, I don't want to focus as much on, like, look at the coverage they're playing, because it's not what we play. But I think you have to look at the way that they play that coverage, because there's always details, right? I can say a team's playing cover 3, but one team's cover 3 does not look like another team's cover 3 a lot of times. And that doesn't mean it's just matching cover 3, but there's a lot of uniqueness to what they could be doing. Just in terms of the depth that they're getting to, the way that they're playing the linebackers in depth, the way that they're approaching, how aggressive do we want to be to protect the side? Like there's a lot that goes into the uniqueness of how they play their coverage. And I think that's the biggest pro when you see what they do at the linebacker position. I want to focus there because to me, there's a lot of consistency for a reason, which means they don't have a ton of turnover, which means they're doing probably a pretty solid job and they like what they have. But it also speaks to the fact that they're really sound. Here's one little aspect that I would also keep an eye on, and I put here a sound linebacker play. Blitzing linebackers is a very big part of this defense. I never thought we had great blitzing linebackers, but I think Jack Campbell through the entirety of last season got a lot better. Like, I think Jack, by the time we got the end of the season, was much better as a blitzing backer. And I was like, this is taking really good steps this season. This is much better. I think he's gotten a lot better. Malcolm Rodriguez has always been a really nice blitzing linebacker. And I think Malcolm Rodriguez, similar to Saracier Dennis, there could be some similarities in kind of how they perform that I think could kind of coexist. Derek Barnes. If Derek Barnes gets brought back, I think he's an excellent pairing with a guy like Larry Foote, with a guy like Casey. I think that would be an excellent spot for him. I think it'd be great coaching staff for him to have a guy that could, continue to work. Because you got to think about it, right? David Correo is the outside backers coach, not Kelvin Shepard. So if Kelvin Shepard stays in where he's now become the inside backers coach, you have these two guys where even if they're not that position, they're like, he's the defensive coordinator now. I think within what they do stylistically, it's going to really lean into Derek Barnes and the strength of Barnes. You think about what Tampa Bay is. Tampa Bay stylistically and personnel-wise is different, right? They value length. They value quickness. They value those big, long defensive ends that can kick inside, right? They value that. They have a nose tackle just like we do, so that's an overlap. They value at their linebackers guys that can blitz. They want flexibility. They want big, stout linebackers that can play the run. But then they also have guys like Barnes, similar to, I don't think there's a great similarity. I don't want to say he's like Braswell. Braswell's more of a pass rusher. But in that 3-4 defense that constantly has 2 on-ball backers, I think that even in a different scheme, because I don't know that we'd run a 3-4 here. I don't know that we'd even go after that because it's just not how we're built. Which again, right off the bat, a difference in styles. But I think that just the style of the way that they play it, not how they're aligned, right? Not what package they come out in, but in just the way that they play it, or formation. But in the way that they play, I think that actually would be a really good spot for Derek Barnes. I think that he would thrive in that kind of scheme. So I would just keep an eye on a guy like that individually. Now, we showed kind of the individuals, man versus zone rates. They're, again, a much higher zone team. Typically, they would rate grade out pretty well. One of the little nuggets that caught my eye when going through this is seeing how much they've gotten out of, like, not the highest round draft pick. And again, this speaks, if you can have, players that are constantly there year after year, it probably means a lot of good things, unless you just don't know what you're doing. And I know they have a good GM. They're good at player acquisition. But, like, think about what they've gotten out of some dudes. And if we just go to the back end, right? Christian Izien, who was an undrafted free agent, is a really nice player. Tampa Bay fans love him. He's a really nice player. He plays slot, cornerback, and safety. So immediately right there, pause for a second. Flexibility in the back end. That's a huge part of every Tampa Bay defense the last few years. I've seen, I think especially this past year, guys that can play different spots. Think of the Lions. Brian Branch, slot corner, and safety. Ring any bells? A little bit. Rings a little bit of a bell for me. He's not the same player, but okay. Similarities. Right, Kirby Joseph, the way that he's developed as a man coverage piece. You see the flexibility in the back end. I think it's such a big part of their team, and it specifically stems from safeties being able to step down and play in coverage. I think that carries over. Stylists, I think that carries over. Versatility in the secondary, and even just coverage types they play. Man coverage, a lot of zone, off-man coverage, press coverage. We'd have that flexibility, I think, in our back pocket, so it would make sense. Front versatility as well. Again, they look at different styles. They have went after different styles than we have, right? We haven't always went after the most length. Brad Holmes always looks length. He always talks about it. Like, I like that. It adds value. Do they have pass rush upside? Like that kind of thing. He values it, but we don't always get the longest defensive lineman. Now, Broderick Martin would fit into that. So would, forget dude's name. I completely forget dude's name right now. The other guy, can't think of it. Levi. Levi would fit into that. Levi's got some good length. Like, some of those guys would fit, but it doesn't have to be the exact same in terms of, like, we're just looking at length necessarily there. That's just how they're built schematically. But I think the versatility up front is what matters. And again, what did we see this last year? Levi showed flexibility. If he comes back, he played DN. Then he goes to D tackle. It works better at D tackle, right? Flexibility there. Aleem McNeil, I think he's a key part of this. Aleem McNeil in this scheme would be a massive piece because Aleem McNeil is a guy that will play outside of a guard naturally. If you watch Tampa Bay when they play their underfront, if they're putting their nose tackle and underfront at a 3 technique on the weak side of a formation, that's a lot to ask from a lot of nose tackles. Like, I don't know if Broderick could handle that, but Aleem McNeil can. So it opens up that flexibility with on the defensive line for him to kind of handle that responsibility. And we already talked about, the backers, Derek Barnes. Can you drop? Can you rush on the play? Trevor Nowaski fits into that. Rush on the play, drop into coverage. Like, there's a lot of guys, even Ben at times, Alex has been that in the past where he's played on the ball in the past. It wouldn't be the exact same, but I think player-wise there's a lot of versatility and there's a lot of things that do carry over similarly. But I think when you also look at what they've gotten out of this personnel, Ryan McCollum, or excuse me, not Ryan, sorry, that was the center. Zion McCollum replaced Carlton Davis. He had his best season this past year. And on top of that, he was a 5th-round pick. They've drafted secondary pieces really well, and I know that neither of these guys are secondary coaches, so I don't want to focus too much on this, but I think it is noticeable how much continuity there is. Like, we hit on the D-line coach earlier, Kalijah Cansey, and, Anthony Nelson did really well, best there, but it's like there's a lot of dudes that are just sticking around, and it's like they have a foundation of who they are, which is very similar to what the Lions are trying to build, is they have a foundation, and it's consistent, and it's the core, it's the young core, and we continue to just work that direction. And these guys have been a part of that, where it's like, these are the core, this is how we're going to play. So now we're adding pieces, they fit the core. Like, it just makes sense. There's flexibility, but it makes sense that even in a different way, there's still value in having guys that play kind of the similar style. I think that carries over. Antoine Winfield, of course, has been a beast for Tampa Bay over the last few years. He missed some time at the end of this year. Kayvon Merriweather stepped in, had a pretty strong finish to the season. This guy, what pick was he? Kayvon Merriweather is an A3 pick, I think. I don't remember what round he was. He may have been undrafted. Kayvon may have been undrafted. Jamel Dean, third-round pick. He's constantly there. Jamel Dean's been really good for them. So I just thought that was interesting that, like, all of these guys that they're having a lot of success with in what they're doing stylistically, not many of them were high, like, first round. Even Carlton was a third-round pick, right? I think Carlton was a third-round pick. These aren't, like, first round, highest paid cornerback. Like, these are middle to back end picks that, because of the way that they have that consistency defensively, and it's like, oh, these are the same guys every single season, it's worked out well. And you can even see it at linebacker. I talked about the blitzing. They like to blitz linebackers. What did Devin White do well with Tampa? Go back to the Super Bowl. Everybody remembers Super Bowl for what? They couldn't block Tampa. Well, what happened? Devin White cooked. Devin White was a blitzer. He just got down. It wasn't a good career for him there, but he was a blitzer. So it worked. It was like, all right, he's a blitzer. So that was a consistent staple of who they were, like blitzing backers, versatility up front. Like, these guys are attacking up front. And because they had that year after year and there wasn't so many changes, I think that's what the Lions have. And that's why I think it can work. Because think about this. If there's one unit defensively, in my opinion, that you could look at as a defense and say, okay, especially if your core is man coverage, and that's who you want to be, it's your foundation. If there's one unit I could take defensively and say, all right, what's the most important in terms of schematics, like when things change? To me, it wouldn't be cornerback. Because if I'm playing man, I'm playing man. Like, you adding Larry Foote, to me, doesn't change significantly what the back end's going to look like. I don't think I asked that question well. But it doesn't significantly change what the back end's going to play out like. They're going to play man coverage, right? That's what it's going to look like. What it would change is the variety. But we played zone 2, right? We played zone 2. But a lot of, I think, the significant changes would happen more so up front. Not necessarily in the back end. You'd have to have flexibility. We have that. We have guys that play man. Like, to me, that wouldn't change significantly. So I think it's actually better that he's a linebacker coach, just like Calvin Shepard. I think he has the same benefit. One of the most important cogs, I think, to making this work as the next defensive coordinator is how does the linebacker position perform? Because that's the position I think that constantly has so much change and movement. And how are we going to ask these guys to play, right? What is their role? Like, I think of Barnes, right? There was a specific role when he had to play off ball. Like, you're the Tampa 2 backer. You run the seam. There's a role that fit him, and then other things, it was kind of messy. You know, you see that right now with what Tampa has. Like, it's very important. It's very important to have a guy that can really, I think, bring these linebackers to their best and put them in spots to be successful, more so than I think it would be with, like, cornerback. Because right now, what we have at cornerback, if Deshae Townsend doesn't leave, is an excellent developer. We've got that develop guys incredibly well. I mean, what he did these guys were awesome last season. So I'm not worried about, like, can he develop corners? He doesn't need to develop corners. He's the defensive play caller. Right? That's going to be my play caller. So I'm more worried about the scheme. But I'm not worried about what the scheme looked like, and here's why. Let me go to some clips. Let me make this all make sense. The scheme matters, but to me, the scheme doesn't matter in the normal sense. The scheme matters because of not what they're playing, but the way that they're playing it. And the way that they play it has uniqueness, but it's also how sound they play it. And that leads to the consistency for what we see defensively, which, again, is really hard to come by. And the Lions have had that. It's not easy to find. Don't matter who's head coach and general manager. Okay, I missed something. Why would Shepard follow AG? AG is new head coach, going to hire his first-time DC. Yeah, that's an interesting projection. I mean, look, we heard the things with Brunell right away. I think that kind of died off, but we heard it. So, I think everything's, when you play a running quarterbacks, in my opinion, you have to play more zone defense. See, I don't completely agree with that, but I think that's not a bad way to think. Here's where I'm with it. Again, it depends what we mean by running quarterbacks. If we're talking about, like, he scrambles, a lot of times zone is going to be better because you have your eyes, but it doesn't make it perfect. And I can show you examples. You go back to that Washington game, I showed a play. Defense went into a cover 2 look, and his mobility killed cover 2. Not because he ran, but because when a cornerback steps down in zone coverage, out of his zone coverage assignment, because now he's playing all of a sudden, the quarterback and not the receiver, that window opens, right? So keeping eyes on quarterbacks, I think, matter. But I don't think, especially if we're just talking about, like, okay, run scheme, for example. Like, think about this. If we're talking about designed runs with a quarterback, What we saw from Daniels, I think, was much better defensively in man than it was in zone. Because in zone, they were able to get Jack Campbell out of the box because the Lions were shifting the strength of their backers to the strength of the receivers. And I think that put us in a really big trouble because as they continue to shift to the strength receivers, they only could do that when they were in zone coverage. If they were in man, he wouldn't shift. He would have just lined up on a tight end. He could have on-ball pressed him. He could have played off-ball, but he would have lined with the tight end. But when you're playing zone, you shift him out of the box. Now, if the tight end splits out wide, that could change things. Unless I play a different version of man, then all of a sudden I put a safety on him. He rolls down. Now my backer can stay in the box. So I think it changes things. It just depends. I think it just depends. I think we saw against Buffalo, like there were things in man and zone. Both didn't work. Both sometimes did work against him. It stresses different, I think, aspects of your defense. I think that's the key. It's like if you're going to play zone, you have to be able to plaster guys in the back end when a play breaks down. But if you're going to play man, you should have those guys plastered. The problem, of course, with man is it puts more stress on the front. But if he's going to break the front anyway, sometimes man is better because you already have everybody plastered. I think it just flips it. It puts a little bit less stress on the front if you're in zone, but at the same time puts a lot more stress on the back end. All of a sudden, they have a lot more to deal with where they're having to find guys on a broken play in zone. So I think it just depends. It truly just depends. I don't think one or the other stops one or the other. I think in theory it does, but I don't think it ever really plays out that way because it just depends on how you're going about it. With AG, we couldn't beat them. And look, we go back through that. I won't go back through that here. I didn't think that was a man coverage issue. I didn't think that was. I mean, some of the biggest plays we gave up, we were sitting in zone coverage because we didn't plaster. Again, it just stresses different spots. Guess AG Madden rating was high enough for the New York Jets. Yo, they better not have Madden ratings for coaches. If they started doing that, I'm lost. You know what I mean? Hey, Madden, you going too far, dog. Well, actually, would that be kind of cool? The rating? I don't know. They need to do something, but maybe, I don't know if that's the answer. Okay, this is what I want to show. A couple of these. So, you're going to see this looks different than us. Now, I guess there's some similarities, right? When we're playing cover 4, we do that too. But it's the way that they play it is what matters. First off, just focus on their backers, right? You see a lot of movement, but I think what's important is the way that they move. Look how sound this is in the back end. Look how sound this is across. Let me make myself smaller because I'm blocking everything. Look how sound this is. Okay? Watch their backers. Okay? They're going to fan out to the left as Demir Gibbs rolls that way. Okay? So Savasier Dennis is going to slide over and help. Safety's going to step down over the number 3, and they're going to play really nice coverage here. And then you're going to see from a guy like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who constantly killed us in this game for whatever reason, really good awareness, gets out there as they're bringing all these. See, this is the problem. They bring out all these different dudes. Got linebackers coming. You got, you don't know who's dropping out. There's 3-man rushes implemented. I love this. I think this will be a lot of fun with our defense. But like great awareness there, reads it, takes away the screen. You'll see as we go through that, there's a lot of that. And I actually think where they were less sound was man coverage. Like there was guys bumping into each other. There was issues with that. I think that could be more solved at kind of the defensive backs coach level, is like figuring that kind of stuff out. I mean, look at them on a play like this. Look at their linebackers in coverage. Look at the depth that they're getting in coverage on a play like this. Right? You got a cover 3 defense. Again, the flexibility is everything because you got Joe Tryon-Shoyinka going into the flat on this play. He's showing that he's rushing. He gets to the flat. But look at the backers, man. Look at the depth that they get, right? Getting right underneath these inside receivers. Then they settle back inside. They take them away. They force the check down. That's the kind of thing that they do well. Even if that's different from how we're going to play it, if they're playing it soundly, good. Here we go. Cover 4, right? I froze myself. Hold up. Okay, now we're good. I froze myself for a second. Yeah, cover 4. Now, we attacked it, and honestly, watching this back, I still don't know how we only scored 20 points. Or 16 points. My gosh. Like, this game was just frustrating to even watch back again. I'm mad I watched this back. But, I mean, we got them isolated a few times, just like this. We got them isolated with St. Brown. We got some scheme beaters against them. We always have that. And that just happens. Like, their man coverage stuff, to me, is not always the most sound, like this, right? We ran some pick plays. We had some success against them when they try to go man coverage. So that didn't work perfectly as well. But what I actually liked on plays like this were their backers. I mean, look how their backers are playing this, man. This would kill us. This would kill us, man. Play action. This heavy of a play action. Look at their backers, though. Look at the discipline. Tight end. Finds the back. Levante does. I mean, they're right on that. They're right on that defensively. And that's the kind of thing where it's like, it's not the coverage that they're playing. I don't care if they're playing cover 1, but how they're playing, it's everything here. This is amazing. It's amazing up front. I know they didn't even release on the play, but it's fantastic. I love seeing that. Now here, yeah, they'll bump into each other, right? Depth issues just like this. I think we looked a little bit more sound, honestly, in some of our man coverage stuff, especially towards the end there. We look really sound in some of the depth stuff. This is not great. here. And again, there's beaters to it. And you can see some differences stylistically. Off man. Some of that splits. They get split kind of tight like this. These coach splits. You're forced into playoff coverage. But there is a press here in the slot. It gets bumped too because of that. But that's when your cover one looks. Oh my gosh, that was a hit too. And those dudes be hitting. Like if they be hitting. So they definitely got their dudes ready for that. Those dudes be hitting dudes. Again, same kind of look here. Back to the whole cover 4 thing. There's beaters for it. And we had a lot of beaters, man. This makes me sad watching our offense, bro. We were sound, man. We were sound. But even the wrinkles like this, like cover 4, but they bring a slot blitz. And then it's like, okay, can we create simulated pressure? Sometimes they would. With all that flexibility, they could. So I think a lot of this is similar to what we're capable of doing just because the players that we have. You know what I mean? Just because of the dudes that we have. And then even like this is where I loved it. I remember this play so much, and you guys all probably remember this one too, man. Goal line set. They go cover 3 here. And this is the one where we're like, oh, he's forced into JMO. But pre-snap, this is not a terrible read, right? You have Laporta in motion. You settle him down. You're hoping that you can take the number 2 receiver and keep him kind of held in for a second. He doesn't at all. JMO runs the speed out, and look at this. Immediately releases out here to the flat. Linebacker then gets his eyes over here. Like, that's as good as it gets. This is like as sound as it gets. And our red zone defense has been really good. I think they've done some things from what I've seen so far better than we did. Maybe not the numbers showing it, but like on Washington, we saw them get the 4th down stop, the way they passed things off. This is as good as it gets, man. It's like, regardless of what coverage you're playing here, from your linebacker position to your DBs, this is being on a string. And for you to have your defensive back, your safety, to get out there to the flat, undercut golf here, and then have David immediately see that and step over, that's as good as it gets, man. They're on a string together. That's awesome to watch that kind of stuff. And you go back to their man covered stuff here. Again, we try to set up a screen. Literally couldn't complete a dang screen against this team. Couldn't happen. And recognition, huge from the outside linebacker position. Joe feels it, gets out on the plate. That's where Golly Barnes can be successful, especially if he can develop a little bit as a pass rusher. We had a new pass rusher this year in the draft chat. We go get a guy that's, kind of a little bit of a stand-up rusher. If he has those qualities where he's capable of dropping into coverage, all of a sudden he fits into this, kind of like Braswell was last season, something like that fits into it. Now you get back to that slot blitzing again, which we love to do with Brian Branch, right? I mean, blitzing is blitzing, but it's all of this up front that becomes the mess. Here they're going to, show it, drop out on the play, go cover 3, bring the slot blitz, and it's sound. Now that was the interception. Probably should have been PI, for being real. Probably should have been PI. So it's different coverage-wise, but you can see how sound that they play across the board. And to me, that's, if there's a case for Larry Foote, it's that. It's not that it's going to be like, well, like Dennis Allen, for example, I think has been tied a lot. And I think it makes sense because Dennis Allen plays a ton of man coverage. There's similarities in terms of personnel that they have. And I think that's great, but I don't think that makes it necessary. I don't necessarily maybe need a guy that's going to do that. Like, I don't need your defense to be exactly our defense. You know what I mean? It could be something different. It could be unique to that. And I think especially with Dennis Allen being a head coach, defense coordinator experience, like it's going to be his defense. But it could overlap because the Lions want to play man. And the only thing I don't like about Dennis Allen, just like immediately, is pressures. They don't create much pressure like ever, like the last couple of years. Part of that's personnel, but dude, they got after like nobody. And if you look at it this last season, they blitzed 20% of the time. Their pressure rates were a little bit better, 21%, but I don't like that. That could be, see, now that could, to me, that could be a stylistic breaker. Like, if they come in and they're like, yeah, we don't want to play zone. We're playing, or man, we want to play 75% zone. We'll play, 20th in man. It's like, all right, maybe this wouldn't work perfectly, or 22nd in man. But if you get a guy that comes in, he's like, I don't want to be aggressive, I think that's hard to overcome because that's what Dan wants to do, right? Dan doesn't want to sit back on his heels. At very least with Tampa, man or zone, they're going to come after you pretty much every year. That's consistent. New Orleans, they'll kind of come after you a little bit. Like, that's the part where I'm like, I don't know if I love it, but I haven't did a deep dive on Dennis Allen, so I'm not saying I dislike it. I think it makes sense. I think that the style makes sense. I think that it's hard to I think that it's hard to envision a guy that doesn't blitz that much. I don't know. I don't see the Lions going that direction. You know what I mean? Like, I would be kind of surprised if they did that. I think right now, if they hired Dennis Allen, I'd be pretty shocked. I mean, 3 years ago, he blitzed 16% of the time. Like, it just doesn't. And that to me that's how you want to play it. I mean, this is consistent. He's consistently near the bottom in blitz rates. It just doesn't give me the vibe that that's what Dan Campbell is after. And that doesn't mean it can't work. They play a lot of man coverage. We know that. They have a lot of guys that fit similar styles. They've always been a press man team. So I get it in the back end. I just feel like coverage-wise, Tampa's played man. It's not like Tampa's never played man. They just don't play it at the rate that we do. But they played it, and they can play it. And we have a guy that can develop DBs. I'm more focused on, I think, the front. Can we stop the run against Jaden Daniels, to what Virgil's saying? Can we stop the run against Jaden Daniels? They did. They were really good against the run against Jaden Daniels. Like, can we be prepared to deal with things like that? I look at Tampa Bay and say, we always had trouble with them offensively. Why? Probably hire that guy. Hire anybody from that team. We had trouble with them constantly. They slowed down Daniels. That was one of the games that this past year I didn't think had a good plan at all. And they're aggressive. They're aggressive. They're first-time DCs. I think that's going to allow that. We'll see. That's what the interview's about. But to me, that allows you to be open-minded because it's like we don't know what you are. We don't know what you're trying to do. But we do know is you have experience doing multiple things in the back end. Everybody's played some man. It's just, can you get to a spot with Dan where we're like, hey, we're on the same page. We know you want to be aggressive. We both got that in common. But will you play man at the rate that I'm cool with? And it's like, yeah, we'll play that on third down. All right, bet. We got something. If a team's willing to play man a majority of the time on third down, you probably have a cop. You have a guy that's going to fit. You probably have a connection there. If he's like, no, every third down and 5 we're playing cover 2, like you're like, that might not work with Dan. That might not drop an 8. Like, remember when Patricia would do that? Nothing wrong with it. It can work. It's just not really our style. We'd rather probably press everybody across the board and just bring 5 or 6 on the play. That's how we want to go about it. But as long as we can get there, like the red zone stuff, there's similarities. The zone cover, we run zone in the red zone. I could buy that that's similar. And they have an aggressive approach, man. Like, I think that this works in a lot of ways. I don't think it's as important as, like, because again, I don't think they're going to come here and they're going to be like, everything they do is Tampa Bay. Like, I don't think so. But in the front, that's open to change. To me, the front should be open to change. You lost your D-line coach, your defensive run game coordinator. Now you have a new one. That should be open to change. Fit to the players that you have, but to me, that's changed constantly. So why would I have an issue with, like, that looking different? And I don't even think that's in the sense of, like, well, do you play single gap or 2 gap? Like, no, keep playing your gap and a half. That's fine. But alignment-wise, that's open to change. We don't need to align the same way as we had in the past. Like, we can align differently. We just have players that fit a specific skill set on the defensive line. We got aggressive dudes. They want to attack gaps, and then they want to press to another one. We have that skill set, but you don't have to align the same way. You don't have to sit at the same fronts. You know what I mean? So, to me, I just think that this could make a lot of sense. But that's what the interview's about, to figure out, I think, if those two things connect and they're kind of on the same wavelength of what they're thinking. But they've already hired one of them, and if this was the case, I wouldn't be surprised. Find a middle road. I'm with you there. Like, now, I do think it's, man, Don Brown was a disaster. I don't know how much man he was playing or zone, but my goodness. Bro, that dude, oh my gosh. That one always felt like, and this is hindsight, that one always felt like, bro, like, okay, we got the dudes to kind of shut down teams we're playing, man, but then you get to, like, Ohio State, it's like, we don't have the dudes anymore. We should probably do something different. It's like, I'm doing the same thing. And it's like, okay, this is not good. This is not going to work. And then it wouldn't work. Wink Martindale was great. Like, Wink's aggressive as heck. Wink, 2 deep safety all the time against Ohio State. I was like, oh, this is working pretty good. Limited the big play. So definitely, like, there has to be uniqueness for game plan. If we come into every game and say we're playing 60% man, we're probably going to lose some games just because of that. Because it just doesn't make sense. But a majority of the time in the NFL, man coverage is much more difficult for offenses to deal with than zone. The numbers say that. Like, man is a much, much harder thing to deal with for an offense because outside of rub routes, there's a lot more of I have to find a way to just beat somebody. And if you can play that at a high level, it's really tough when sped up for that to make sense, for to win there constantly like it is zone. Zone always has openings outside of the style in which you play the zone. There's always going to be openings, especially if you have time. So I'm with you. I think every week's got to be unique. We can't be playing because we want to play man 60% every time. But I think saying that you want to do it majority of the time on third down is fine. I would have liked to see us play zone last week, right? Like last week, I would like to see us play zone against Washington on third. I don't think we ever did. I would have liked us to, or on third and short. I don't think we ever did. So, like, that's an example. Like, yeah, play man on third. That's who you are. I'm with it. Have, your kind of rooted foundation. Hey, we usually get back to man more than most teams. Like, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that because that fits who we have, too, and that's what we built towards, and Alex is good at it, and, Amik's really good at it, and Terrion's built for that, and, Carlton comes back, he's pretty good at it. It's like all these dudes make sense for that. We have Branch is good at it. But I just think that's an easier process to kind of come across rather than how easy it would be to, I don't know, man. I just don't, I think if you, like, so, chat, go with me on this. Let me know what y'all think. If the Lions hired Dennis Allen, do you think his defense, let's take out the idea that Dan Campbell's like, no, you have to do it this way. If he was hired and it was like Dennis, do whatever you want to do you think it would look more like Dennis Allen, or do you think it would look like what Dan Campbell's envisioning? Would it look just like what Dennis Allen did with New Orleans? I would probably guess it probably would. That would be my assumption, is that it's probably going to look pretty much like what Dennis Allen does. And then you're at a point where maybe he's willing. Maybe he's like, I will be more aggressive. And then it makes sense. But I would assume that he's going to make it look like his defense. It's going to be his defense is what I do. Nothing wrong with that, but there has to be a ground that they could find there with Dan Campbell. And I just get the sense that I haven't really seen that out of Dennis, but maybe I don't know enough about him. You know what I mean? Maybe Dennis has done that. Maybe Dennis has been that style like that Dan Campbell likes in the past. But when I've seen, I've never seen that. I've seen a team that doesn't create like any pressure. When you watch them, you're like, oh gosh, can we just get a little bit of heat? Just a little bit of heat? No? Okay, we just won't get any pressure today. That's just what it feels like every time I watch the dang Saints. You know what I mean? All right, we just won't get any pressure today. That's fine. It's a disaster, man. I honestly think the guy that intrigues me is Jim Leonard. Like, I don't know how you say his name, but from Denver. I mean, he plays more man. He played more man last year than Dennis Allen. He played 60% of the time he played man coverage last year. You know what I mean? And I'm interested in that too, because he's been I think he was a defense coordinator in what was it, Wisconsin? Well, that doesn't sound right. Kind of sounds like it's in the ballpark. It sounds like Wisconsin. I think it was Wisconsin. So he's had experience. I haven't really looked into that side too much, but I think he's interesting. He's young. It'll be his first time. I don't know if the Lions are after that, though. Again, I'll leave it with this. I think the fact that the Lions are going kind of is this guy gotten attention everywhere else, or is this just here? Is this just here? Because I don't think I've heard that anywhere else. I don't think I've heard this name brought up for any other team. But if there was another team, let me know, because I don't think this feels like kind of off the wall a little bit as a, like I said earlier today, I didn't even know who, I was like, Larry Foote. I didn't know this dude was coaching. Larry Foote was out here doing, okay. But no, I'll say that, yeah, so tomorrow I will look into Dennis Allen more, because I don't know enough about him. Tomorrow I'm going to look into Dennis Allen, as well as others. I really want to dive into that tomorrow and kind of see what that's going to look like. So that's the plan for tomorrow. He's been the DC in New Orleans since 2015. And then he became the head coach. That's a long time in one spot, man. Dude's been there for 9 years, 10 years. I don't know. But yeah, no, we'll see, I think that's where things could be different, right? Is Dennis playing to his players? Not to his players, like he should be, right? Is it a here's how our players fit, so this is how we're gonna play? Is that what it is? Or is it more of like that's where the whole idea of, Aaron Glenn, he's kind of his own guy. He can kind of play his own style. Because overall, this all does kind of start and stop with Dan Campbell. Like when you really go through it, like what's Dan Campbell want this thing to kind of look like? Because I assume that the aggressiveness stemmed a lot from Dan Campbell. Because Dan's like, yo, that's how I want to do it. I don't think that was just Aaron Glenn like coming up with that, or Dennis Allen just rubbing off on it. Like I think that was probably a lot of Dan. That's how we're gonna go about it. How about Jim Schwartz? I like Jim Schwartz. Jim Schwartz is awesome. I'd be surprised if he came back here to be our defensive coordinator, but I've always loved me some Jim Schwartz. If Jim Schwartz is our defensive coordinator, that'd be fun. That'd be so fun. Jim Schwartz is awesome. Jim Schwartz is awesome. He's been a great defensive coordinator. He's awesome, man. You know what I mean? He's awesome. But yeah, no, I don't want to go too much into Allen thing because I don't know enough about him. I know there's an overlapping connection. I know he's been a defense coordinator. I know what it's looked like recently just from watching him. But that's all I really know. And I think if I speak too much on it, I'm just going to be saying things that I don't know. So I don't want to go too deep into that one. It makes sense. Like if they went Dennis Allen, it would make sense, right? Because yeah, it makes sense. And the connections matter. We saw that today. Like, Dan Campbell has an overlap with these guys, so it makes sense. But I think, speaking on Larry Foote, who I wanted to focus on today, I think it makes sense. I think he makes a lot of sense, actually. Like, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't really know anything, but Calvin Shepard seems like Dan Campbell. I think so, too. I think the problem with Shepard is, well, one, he doesn't really have much experience. He's only been a linebacker coach. It's not a problem, but that's all he's been as a linebacker coach, right? He's been he was on a player development staff with LSU. His linebacker, what I like about that is I think that's the important positional group for us because there's been so many changes. What I like about Calvin Shepard is that he's been here, right? We actually, if you want to know more about this, I did a show yesterday on Bleacher Report. It's on my events tab. If you watch over there, there's like a 30-minute show of me basically just talking about why I think this would make sense, why it would make sense. I kind of made a case for him. And, he's been here through the stylistic changes. He was here when Romeo and Trey were playing outside backer, and when James Houston took off and we found the new role for him, and he was a part of that. And then he transitioned over to inside backer, and it was like coach. And Jack Campbell, he had his best season. When we added Alex, he kind of saw that whole unit come together. So I don't dislike that one either. I think in-house he's the favorite. I would be surprised if they went with Jim O'Neill, even though he has experience. I'd be pretty surprised. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I think Shea Townsend would have a much stronger case if he was here more than a year. But in fairness, Larry Foote hasn't been here more than a year, and it's kind of going down the same path, right? Pass game coordinator. What's the difference? Well, one's a linebacker coach and one's a DB's coach. Okay. He's been in the building at least. I mean, I think Shea Townsend's got a strong case, bro. Like, in-house, Townsend I don't think is far off from Calvin Shepard, man. If you ask me, I think Shepard has the best benefit of all. He's been here through all of this. He's learned with Aaron Glenn. It'd be his first time, but he's been along for the ride of figuring this out together, seeing the schematic changes up close, and seeing what the Lions want it to look like. So I have no issue with Calvin, but I think if you were like, when you start to get to in-house options, Shea has got to be like right up there. I think he's like right up there with him, and I think that Shea Townsend, I mean, he's got a very similar case to Larry Foote. Man, the only difference is that he doesn't know the other guy. He's got a case, though, man. I played linebacker. That's how I got into it. And it's like, all right, a lot of similar things here. And you've done well. The linebacker room has done well. So isn't Townsend in his 30s? He might have been in his 30s. I think I had his age. Let me see. Maybe I didn't. Let me see. I thought I would have wrote that. Oh, he's 49. He's 49. Charlie, he looked that young? He's 49. Calvin Shepard's 37. Calvin Shepard's in his 30s. He's 30, unless I wrote this wrong. He's 37. Deshae's, no, that would be right, because he didn't retire. He retired kind of early. Deshae's 49. Terrell Williams was 50. And then Jim O'Neill's 46. Yeah. So he's a little bit on the older side. Shep Dells, but Dan is so loyal. Yeah, no, he is. I don't think it's a, but I don't think it's a, it'd be a, the only thing is I don't know here's where I'm at with Calvin. Like, if you kept Calvin, does he get more added to his job title, and what would that be? What would that be? The only thing that I can think of is you name him because if this, let's say our defensive line coach Casey comes in as a run game coordinator, is you name him assistant head coach. Like, you just name Calvin Shepard assistant head coach. You keep him around as your linebacker coach. Because I think they really like it. I think that think about the changes that have taken place at linebacker coach. Like, think about this just for a second, right? I know Scotty Montgomery's our assistant head coach now, so I don't know. I guess you can have two assistant head coaches. You can figure something out. Hey, call Calvin Shepard co-defense coordinator. Just, I don't know. But think about this, though. Calvin Shepard, the Lions have had a lot of changes at linebacker coach, right? There's been a lot of, Mark DeLone. Y'all remember Mark DeLone was the guy that kind of got it started here? And then David Correo steps in and, he's working with the D-line. It's like, all right, work with some outside backers. And then you got Calvin Shepard moving. Calvin Shepard's been like the consistent guy there. Defensive backs coach has changed. Defensive lines coach has changed a couple times. The guy that's been like, you're here and you move from one to another, but you're still working with backers is Calvin. I think that matters a lot, but I also think it's like, I think Dan is like really cool with, we like having you, man. We like having you work with the backers. It's such an important part of who we are, and we like having you there, man. Like, we don't want to put you in a different role. Like, maybe we could add something to your job title, But I can understand Dan being like, yo, we want to keep you at linebacker coach, bro. Like, you're really good at what you do. You've added consistency to this room. We'd like to keep you there. I don't know what you add to his title, though. I don't know what you'd add. I have no idea what you'd add to his title. Unless you made him DC, I don't know. Run game specialist. No? Okay. Hybrid players specialist guy. Yeah, Todd Walsh, man. Todd Walsh, earned the right to rush the passer, bro. Hey, I rocked with Todd Walsh. Todd Walsh was a dog, too. Bro, we got a good track record of hiring D-line coach. That's the point. We hire a lot of good coaches, man. We hire a lot of good coaches. I'm confident Dan's going to get this right. And it'll be a guy that's not top name, and it'll be like, dang, this guy's pretty darn good when you start to look at it, which is why I think Larry Foote makes sense. Man, though, I don't know. I don't know what you name him. I don't know. I don't know what maybe like defensive analyst. No, that's probably a step back. I don't know what you name him. Man, I don't know. I don't know, man. I think MCDC wants a D coordinator he doesn't have to worry about. Probably. Yeah, no, that's probably true. That's probably true. Which would make sense to go after experience, but I also think that's why Larry Foote could work. You got two guys that were co-defensive coordinators. They're kind of setting, as Ben John's laid out, they're kind of setting the table already. So now it's just about play calling. I mean, does that, if you have those two, if they came both in, you're like, hey, these guys are, Larry Foote's to DC, you're the co-DC. It's like, all right, we got something here. Maybe that's what you do. You bring in Casey as a D-line coach / co-defensive coordinator. You hire Foote as your defensive coordinator, and you make Kelvin Shepard the defensive run game coordinator. Huh. I don't know. That sounds interesting. It might be doing too much, but it sounds interesting. I don't know. Anyway. I don't know. Anyway, that's all I wanted to hit on tonight, man. I want to hit on Larry Foote. I want to hit on that, give him some attention. And then tomorrow I plan on going through some outside of the house options. So send me names if y'all got names that you think are interesting. I've seen them in the chat today, so I'll definitely visit those. What about someone in college? I don't hate that either. I don't hate that. I think I would prefer a guy that's been in professional football a little bit. But I'm not counting it out. I think Notre Dame's coach just went. So I know Penn State's defensive coach has gotten some attention, defense coordinator. I don't know. Wink Martindale doesn't seem like he's leaving Michigan. So I don't know that he's actually in play. I don't know who that would be. But if you guys got names, man, send them to me. Send me on X. Message them to me. And I might add them to the list. I probably won't be able to get through so many just because, it takes a little while. But if I get through a few of them, it's a good start. All right. Michigan about to be a powerhouse? Come on, man. That's what I'm saying. I'm fired up for next year. Hey, the end of the season got me pumped. We beat Alabama. That was the most shocking victory I've ever. You know what I mean? I thought that was gonna be a blowout, and it was like, we probably shouldn't win this game. We're not really scoring touchdowns, but we did. We found a way. They kept fumbling. It worked out. Oh, that's crazy. I put money on Foote. Coming for a Radio Society, great. Oh, I appreciate it, Virgil. All right. Yo, place your bets, man. Where y'all think you're going? Penn State, DC just got hired. Oh, he went to Clemson? Oh, okay. Whoa, wait, for what? His head coach? No, not his head coach. He went to DC? Still surprising. Michigan is about to be powerhouse. Thanks, Dose. Ready for draft content? Yes, starting next week, draft content's on the way. I want to focus on coaches this week just because it's so, relevant. And as soon as I get the draft stuff, and, next week when I'm gone, it's kind of pull away from a lot of coaching stuff until something happens probably. So I want to focus on that through the rest of the week. But, yeah, next week, draft content isn't. Like I said, I leave Monday. I return Friday. I'm pumped to go to the Senior Bowl, bro. That's going to be awesome. But there is some draft content out there now. Go to the Roundtable Sports. We have a Draftaholics show. We do every week, once a week, we go our top 5 players by position. I've been on that every show. So you can see my top 5. Going to the draft with Trevor and Connor. I don't know who that is. Trevor and Connor. That sounds like PFF guys. Is that PFF guys? Maybe. Let me know, who is that? Pro State. Oh, Jay. Hey, Jay, you got to get that checked out, dog. I'm gonna Be careful, bro. That does not sound good. Okay, the RCPF. I guess maybe I'll see him there. I'll be there. I'm not going with them. I'm going with our roundtable guys. We got most of us. Well, our Patriots guy is on the Draftaholic show, so he'll be there. The Jets guy is not on the Draftaholic show, but y'all know Richie. Richie will be there. And then I think Dan Mitchell's going to be there, the Bills guy. And I think there's might be one more. Oh, Bro Schmo's going to be there. I think there might be one more from the roundtable going. So, man, we got to – it's going to be fire. I'm fired up for that, man. I think we're going to see a lot of people there, man. We're going to see a lot of people there. That's going to be what's up. But I got – you know what I'm saying? I'm not just going to watch the game. I got the credentials, Chad. I got credentialed, man. I'm pumped. All right. I think we can leave it there. Hopefully it warms up. I know, man, it's like 40 degrees or something. Like, it better be more than 40 degrees. The last time I looked, it was like 40 degrees. I heard it was like 60. 60, I'm cool with. 40 degrees, that's a problem. That's a problem. But shout out to BetUS, man. YouTube 150 is the code. 150% deposit match. Oh, they're hitting me up. All right, calm down. I don't want to chat. No. But I just saw this. This is crazy. Money line's even, right? I guess that makes sense. It'd be kind of weird if one of these were more likely than the others. Head or tails, chat? I'm gonna ask y'all. Tell me, what should we do? Head or tails? What do y'all think it's gonna be? I'm feeling tails. Usually I think heads. I'm feeling tails. Feeling tails, man. Yeah, Charles with me. I'm feeling tails. Shout out to BetUS, man. YouTube 150. That's the code. 150% deposit match. First deposit, 125%. Next two deposits up to $2,000. Last thing, I hit Broski Bear from the channel. Yo, he came in the chat of the round table. He's like, unban me. It's like, bro, I didn't ban you, dog. I don't know what happened. That's tough. He's the Pete Rose of this channel. Lifetime ban. That must be what happened. At some point, we probably got to get him back. Just for like a little bit, just because it's hilarious. But it's crazy. It's like, broski, I don't know, bro. Threw me off. I don't know. I was wondering why I hadn't seen him in chat in a while. As something Lions related. Yo, send me questions. If y'all have something that'd be like good, especially if it's player specific, definitely send me questions. Like if y'all got something that's spicy, like that's a good question. That's not inappropriate. Maybe I could get one of those in there. That's my goal, man. I want to get a couple questions answered. They probably won't be that deep, but I want to get a few. All right, we're going to leave it there, man. Unbanned dude is cheering for injuries. All right, that is a problem. That is a problem. Broski, I want to meet Broski, man. Bro, I mean, I feel like he's like super trolling. But he's like trolling, but he takes it an absolute couple steps too far. And it's like, man, I see what you're trying to do. I got you. But it's like, yo, you kind of went to like the next step. And it's like, all right, now at this point, it's like, even if you are trolling, it's like kind of weird, bro. It's a little bit weird. I got to meet Broski. I got to meet Broski, dog. All right, man, we got to get out of here, man. Shout out to everybody who joined. And I will see y'all tomorrow at some point, hopefully with a defensive coordinator video, out-of-house options. Till then, man, have a great night. If you're just joining, we hit on the Brad Holmes thing. We hit on all the Brad Holmes presser comments, and then we hit on Larry Foote. I think that's everything, man. I think that's everything. Yeah, training for a trees is crazy work. It's crazy. Yeah, he going too far. He going way too far. All right, man. We go get out of here, man. I'll see y'all soon. We out. Have a great night.